Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the Risen Fallen podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hendrickson, and we are about to jump on the line here with Aum Gandhi, the Aum Gandhi from RunTriBike. And he's been on the show before. This is his round 3 episode. Very excited for this conversation. I'm excited to hear what you guys think as well. All of the links to connect with Aum and see the projects that he's doing, the charity that he's running for, will all be in the description of this podcast episode, whether you're watching this on YouTube or any other podcast platform, anything like that. So make sure you go and check those out. Welcome to the show. That's pretty much it. Let's jump straight into this conversation. I hope you guys like it. Much love. Let's go, baby.
Tell me about how you've been, man. How's life been?
It's going pretty good, man. It's going pretty good. I've just been working lots and doing jiu-jitsu, and that's pretty much it. Spending as much time with family as I possibly can. I don't know how much I can talk about it because I don't know how the stuff is going to go down, but I just got my truck hit the other day, so I was kind of tested. My patience was tested, and we'll see how that all goes. I'm just kind of working with my insurance, and it's kind of weird here because I know like in the States you guys have a lot more like competition in terms of like auto insurance, but here our auto insurance is provided by our government, so everyone has the same insurance. So like when you get in an accident and you call your insurance, they kind of deal internally with the entire thing because everyone has the same insurance provider. So it's kind of a weird situation. We'll see how it turns out, but yeah, I just had my patience tested the other day. That was on Friday, literally 2 days ago. So
man, that's still an ongoing thing then. I mean, and
hasn't even started technically.
That's crazy to me. I actually didn't know that that there was, government insurance in terms of like auto. I mean, there's probably got to be pros and cons to that. I mean, the way they run things here is like a corporation, but yeah, I mean, the fact that you're even like sitting and just having a conversation about it, whereas like I know a lot of people who, if that happened 2 days ago, would spiral out of control. That has to say something about your character, man.
Oh, dude, I was literally laughing about it the day of. I was like, it's about time I get another test from God, man. That's literally the way I was thinking about it. I just had a conversation about it yesterday with a friend of mine on the podcast, which is going to air a week before this, but I was like kind of thinking about how much my personality's changed because I've dealt so much with like kind of anger issues. And this time there was like no yelling. There was no like throwing a fit or anything like that. Like it was literally just like, I just laughed about it. And I was like, I guess this is the test I'm going through right now. It's everyone, there's physical tests, there's emotional tests, there's spiritual tests. And this was my emotional test, and I feel like I'm passing so far. We'll see how the situation develops. It might push my buttons a little bit more, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much it. Just been working a ton in construction, training jiu-jitsu as steady as I possibly can. I'm going to the gym 5 nights a week, and then on my weekends, I just run and stretch. Lift a little bit of weights, but yeah, I've just been going gung-ho with martial arts a lot more recently, and I did a competition a couple months back and did pretty well. I won my division, which was pretty sweet, and I got another competition coming up in a couple months. I might try and squeeze in one in the middle, but beginning of June is going to be my next competition for jiu-jitsu. And other than that, man, just steady working on the podcast and spending time with the family as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you've got things going on different fronts, and I like that since we've had our last talk, you really shifted, almost like you've kind of gone like more all in, or you've like put more resources into like jujitsu. And um the fact that he did well in the competition. I mean, now I was thinking about it the other day, how like, whether you have talent or don't have talent, if you just show up every day and you're disciplined like you are going 5 days a week, like stuff starts to like come together, consistency. And seems like it's going good for you, like night in, night out. You're putting in the work, and you're also doing the work outside the work, like stretching and weightlifting and running. So, man, kudos to you. I mean, um, just, it's crazy how a little bit of discipline can take you a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely one of those sports where there is like all different types of physiques and bodies and different people in there. There's guys that are taller and longer. There's guys that are shorter and more stout. There's kind of guys like me that fall in the middle. And I remember my very first day. I went in there and like a 60-year-old man beat the hell out of me, and I was like, "There's got to be something behind this whole thing now," because I thought like if I were to meet that guy, I'd be like, yeah, I could kick his ass. And he wipes the floor with me. And I'm like, well, maybe there's a lot more technique to this stuff than I anticipated. Maybe just being strong and fast and high endurance won't get me as far as I thought. But I mean, it definitely helps. But yeah, it's one of those things that it's like, I definitely have the personality type of like when I find a new puzzle like that, and that's the way I look at it, I just get obsessive. I'm like, okay, I got to figure out how to beat this game. And the beautiful part about something like jujitsu is like I mean, I'm sure you can relate to this with ultra running too. It's like there's no real winning this game. There's always going to be the next challenge, the next challenge, the next challenge, and with every time you kind of get promoted, you go from like I'm still a white belt after a couple years of training, and it's like even after I'm beating white belts, it's like no, you're just dipping your toes in the water. Like
Yeah.
there's new levels to this every single time. It's like once you finish a 5K, it's like okay, now you got to master a 10K. Now you got to master a half marathon. Now you got to master a marathon. Now you got to master ultra marathons. Now you got to master multiple ultra marathons in a year. Like there's
Yeah.
always a next level to it, which I just whenever I find challenges like that, I become obsessive about it. Like it's all I think about. It's the content I start consuming. It just all day I'm like, I can't wait to train jujitsu tomorrow. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I feel the same way about ultras. And it's funny that you bring up the example of the 60-year-old man, because I feel like ultra running is such an old head sport too. And I can't tell you how many times I've been humbled by, somebody who has more experience and passes me later in the race because they're going a steady, like the guy who's going a steady 11-minute like pace, is always going to beat the guy who's going 8, 9, 10, and then slows down to like a 15 or 16. Um, just it's crazy how like, experience can do that for you. And like you're so right about like, like always looking for the next thing and like looking for the next challenge. I mean, you know, we just keep moving the goalposts and looking for the next thing that like scares us, the next thing that challenges us to grow. And I mean, it's, it's awesome. And what I get from you saying that is like, I think we're both, you know, very driven by the process more than like the goal, and I heard this like quote that I really liked. It was something like, the man who loves to walk is going to go farther than the man who loves the destination. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting from you is like I can tell you're like really enjoying the process of figuring it out. Like you say, I'm still a white belt after 2 years, but it's like in reality, we keep moving the goalposts. So don't we want to always be white belts for in life, just always being a beginner and learning?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like I don't really care about the color of my uniform. I just want to show up and have fun and learn every single day. Like there's always a new challenge every single time. Even when we revisit different moves that I've done in the past, there's always like one little detail of like just turn your hips to this angle. And it's like, oh, I never thought of it that way. That does make it feel easier and more efficient. And yeah, it's like step a little bit more to this angle or move your head a little bit more to this angle. Or if you can move your opponent's head this way, then that'll make it easier to use their body weight. And there's just so many different, like it's such a weird, complex puzzle that I have one friend who's like much better than me. He's been doing it for probably over a decade now. He's a brown belt, which is pretty high level. Like that's the only step under black belt. And he's like, dude, this is human chess. That's what this is. It's just like human chess. You're just moving the puzzle pieces and reacting to what your opponent does. And yeah, when you first start off, it's like, I'm going to try this move. And then like when you get to the higher levels, it's like, I'm going to try this move so that maybe my opponent will react this way. So then I can do this move. Like, it's like
Yeah.
it's all like diversions that way. It's such a cool sport, man. I've
Yeah.
never done anything like it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, all those little intricacies like you talked about, like even with running, like, keeping your like learning, like keeping your head up and like, watching your strike and like swinging your arms and um, just all those like little intricacies and the attention to detail. Like, I think it might like psych some people out, but I think once you become like really into the process and like part of that puzzle, then you really start to like chase those details and you sort of become like a student of the game that you're in. And um it's funny that like we talk about like the mindset behind all this, right? Because like people on the outside looking in see like two brutish sports. Like, why would you want to go out and do 60K on a Saturday? Why would you want to wrestle? Why would you want to wrestle and get into headlocks and stuff with somebody 5 days a week? But when we talk about it this way, it's like so much of what we do is more mental than it is like physical. And that's just the amazing part about it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an interview with a guy named Jean-Jacques Machado, who's a master at jujitsu. And I was listening to a podcast he was on, and he's like, when you're training in jujitsu, it's more than just showing up to the gym and wrestling a bunch of dudes. Like, it's how do these things apply to your real life scenarios? How do they apply to your actual life? And that's what training in jujitsu actually is. And I'm sure that like you've kind of felt similarly with running ultras, where there's been probably times in your life, like the other day for me, when I got like my truck was hit, it was like, okay, I deal with adversity every single day. I deal with the uncomfortability of like feeling like, all right, this is it. I'm about to give up. And then thinking in my head, stay cool, stay calm. Is there a way out of this where it's not the end? Like, is there anything I can do to maneuver out of this? And just having that mindset now of just like, take a breath. If you can still breathe, you're still in the game. Like you can try your best to just maneuver out of this. And if you can't, it's not the end of the day. There's still another fight tomorrow. Like that's kind of the way that I look at it now. And for me, I think that that's been a great way to kind of start to channel my own inner demons in regards to like anger issues and just kind of dealing with finding like an equilibrium, finding a balance that way.
Yeah, I mean, you make a really good point about like how these things just like translate. It's not just about like doing the sport itself, right? People might just see like us doing the sport, seeing it as a hobby, but to me, like, and I think you would agree with this too, it's preparing us for the trials and tribulations of life, which, like Goggins himself has said before, life is the greatest competitor of all time, like life is going to hit you like a semi truck, I mean, literally like what happened to you 2 days ago, what happened to me the last time we talked, I was going through some shit and we talked about it. And, like, I think without ultras, I wouldn't have been able to react the way I did. And I think I'm getting the same with how you're kind of reacting to it in terms of like a puzzle too. Like you're trying to figure out like, is this something, like, is there a way out? Like, what is the next step? And for me, like with ultras, it's more about like, what is the next step I can take forward? Because if you look up at the peak or the summit that you have to go to, you're going to get overwhelmed. Or, you're at mile 30 of the race, of a 100-mile race, and you think I got 70 more to go, you're going to get overwhelmed. But if you take it one step at a time, then all of a sudden, like things start to snowball and you just start moving forward, and it helps you kind of compartmentalize like your emotions within that too, because you know running 100 miles might be hard, but I can run 1 mile 100 times.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Dude, you sent me that screenshot of your run yesterday, and I showed my girlfriend, and she's like, "Man, Ohm is always running. Like there's no like like I've got a lot of friends that compete in a lot of different sports, and I like obviously being kind of like a hyper competitive guy, I know a lot of competitive people, and she's like, I never like have like I know a lot of people that do these things, but it's like she's like, dude, this guy is always running. Like always. He's either running or sleeping. Like that's it. Like that's all he does. And I'm like, seriously, he's a beast. Like that's all he does is work and run and sleep. That's it. From my perspective, like that's what I see you as. But yeah, dude, tell me about this run, because like it was like almost 60 kilometers, right?
Yeah, it was like, I'd say it was about 58 to 60 kilometers. Weather was great, but there was like, it was up at altitude. So, my goal going into this race was it was one more second to last like tune-up race. I'm leaving for, Nepal in 4 weeks for the Everest 70K Ultra, which is a foot race from Everest Base Camp. That is 70 kilometers down from Everest Base Camp to Namche Bazaar down at the bottom, but it's the only one of the three that has a climb, and I don't know how many people are actually doing the 70K distance. There's people doing the marathon and half, but yeah, it was just a tune-up race for me to go in. And it's weird for me to say this because, we were talking about goalposts, and I remember a few years ago when 50K races like this were like my Goliath. And now I'm going in here and I'm like, I'm going to push 80%. Like, I'm just going to see how I feel it out like a boxing match. um, Beautiful day. I met some really cool people, which is the amazing thing about this community. I literally met somebody doing the 60K who was sitting down and almost basically in tears. And I was like, what's wrong? She's like, oh, nothing. I'm just so happy to be out here. Like, I had surgery like 6 months ago and now I'm doing this thing. And I was like, wow, just, I mean, I just had a good old day out there, and, no headphones, no music, just, one of the things I used to do when I started ultras was half the time I'd have music or podcasts on, and I've totally like turned that off in this training cycle. And I've just focused on my movements and just focused on nature. And one of the things I've started to do, including in this run, is to start to voice record whenever I have something to say or something spills out.
Yeah, man. Dude, I could like, cuz my runs are nothing like what you do. Like I do like 5 to 10 Ks on the regular, and I listen to podcasts. I listen to like music the whole time. It's usually a podcast or an audiobook. But that's like 40 minutes, an hour tops that I'm running for, really. What is it like running for 7 hours with nothing else playing? Because that's insane to me, man.
Oh, it's crazy. Like all the thoughts that go through your head, I'm starting to get used to, like, I'm starting to figure out like parts of my mind, like the things I'll say when I get low, like I already know it's coming. You know, I'll start to like, in the past, like there'd be a lot of frequency of like beating myself up and saying like, man, why are you doing this? Like, why are you out here? Like, you can't do this, sense of like imposter syndrome, because there are a lot of people who've been doing this a long time. There are a lot of people who've been running since they were younger. And for me, it's not a sport that comes naturally. I just get out there and show up every day. And then the most fascinating thing is that there are moments where I'm actually just thinking nothing at all and I'm just existing. And I think those are just the most like amazing moments where it's just like I have to focus on one foot in front of the other. But it's really fascinating to start to understand through my training because I don't listen with headphones, and I'll go for hours on end. It's really fascinating to know the kind of stuff that I'm going to say because when it happens in a race, then I can react to it properly too. And for me, I had a really big growth moment in that sense. Like at mile 24, 25 in the race, there was about maybe like a 15-kilometer stretch between like aid stations. And I was starting to run out of water. A lot of people ran out of water. They were not easygoing miles. And I remember things got really tough. And then the talk started coming out, like the words. And I was just like, you know, it was crazy how quickly I sounded it up by just saying like, you know what, Ohm, like you're out here doing this thing, like showing up every day, like I got your back, man. I'm proud of you. Um, and it was the first time I'd done anything like that in any setting like that. And all of a sudden I felt like energy just spring through my legs and just power. And I just like started just hustling up this like hill and like running. And at the end of the race, I just started picking people off, like, um, it's just crazy how, you know, how powerful it is to like be your own best friend out there.
And is that something that you've kind of always had within you, or is it something that you've kind of just developed through training, or was it something that just happened sporadically during this race? Or
I think it was developed through training, especially this training cycle. I've put down more miles in the past, and I've put down like cycles where I did possibly more physical training than this, but as far as like being intentional and being intuitive and not listening to music and um just being all rounded, I think this is the best training cycle that I've ever had. Um and going back to what we were saying, like what you do in jujitsu and what I do in ultra running, like so much of it is mental, right? So like being intentional with like training my mind, um to understanding that my demons are going to react a certain way and say certain things and being able to react back at them has helped me more than any of my physical training ever has in becoming a more well-rounded runner. Um, so I think just sharpening that mental toolbox, man.
what does training cycle look like? What does it look like to train for like a 60 or a 70K run? Because like I am trying my very best to fathom that. The closest I've ever come to that, which is not even close, is running a marathon on flat ground. And I basically was like, well, I can run a half marathon. I run 10Ks all the time. So it's basically like doing a little bit more than 4 10Ks. That's kind of the way I thought of it. Didn't train for it at all. And I was in the hurt locker for a day or two after for sure. But like, what does training look like for running that long of a period of time at that distance?
Oh man, just a lot of time on your feet. Um, when you start with the training, I'd say it's pretty similar to how you would train for a marathon or a race, building your aerobic base and doing a lot of easy miles. That's on the physical side and the mental side, actually. That is one of the things that I really had to do. And the reason I say mental is because I really had to pump the brakes on my ego, because I had done, thousands of miles leading up to this. And then, obviously I DNF'd at Moab and we had a conversation shortly after. And that was when I bought into the idea of, I don't know if you're familiar with MAF training, like heart rate training,
No, I don't
zone
know
two.
much about it.
So the idea of zone two training is, your body has a certain range where you're in like a fat burning zone. Um, and that is the zone where like, um, that's like your conversation pace normally in terms of like your perceived effort. Like it's the pace that you can do for like hours.
Mhm.
For a lot of people, I think we gray line our miles because we feel like we've been doing this long enough that we should be at a certain level of fitness, be at a certain pace. So when I DNF'd Moab, I decided I had to, first off, like we talked about how there was a whole mental journey to that, like 6 weeks without running, trying to figure out who I was, and realizing ultimately that running may be a part of who I am, but it is not the reason why I exist. I am enough with or without running. That was the first step. The next step physically was putting the brakes on my ego and realizing that my zone two pace when I picked up a heart rate monitor was like a 15, 16-minute mile. And going out there every single day, cranking out slow miles and just getting passed by everybody. And, it's crazy to put yourself in a position like that because our mind and our ego will tell us that like we should be in a certain place because we've been doing this for a certain amount of time.
Mhm.
But as I bought into that, what happens is like your pace starts to get faster in that easy zone the longer you stay in it because your body starts to build mitochondria, biology, powerhouse of the cell, we say it all the time. And your heart gets stronger. And now I run a 930 pace per mile at the same heart rate that I was running a 16-minute pace 6 months ago. Um, and the reason I say that was mental is because you're subjecting yourselves to these like 15, 16-minute miles for hours at a time. You can't go fast, you can't like sprint. So you can't really hit that runner's high. So it falls back to like discipline. Um, but, going past that, like the rest of it, and we can get into this, is like more specific to the kind of race I'm doing, which is like on rocky, icy terrain at altitude. So I spend a lot of time up in the mountains, just running downhill on like the rockiest, most steep terrain I can find, running uphill, um, doing sprints on my hard sessions, and just getting out there for hours at a time, like, runs that are 5 hours long, 6 hours long, just complete solitude by myself, and just practicing like eating while running. And I put together like 5 of the last 6 weeks. I put together weeks over 100 kilometers, and just a lot of climbing in those weeks. And every session is intentional.
Yeah, man. Because that race yesterday, I think you sent me a screenshot. It was like 2,500 meters of elevation
Something
during
like
that.
that. Yeah.
And is that both ways? Like that's the elevation at the finish line, or is that the elevation throughout the race and you climbed that, but also had to
Yeah.
descend
Oh,
that?
the total elevation gain. It was closer to 3,500 feet. It was closer to maybe like 1,200 meters. Um,
Okay.
and then it was a net downhill race, so it was like 1,500 meters of like down. So there was a lot more downhill than uphill, uh, which meant like my quads were sore
That's
today.
why I was asking, man, because I feel like people think the uphill is like the worst part, but I know,
No.
dude, running downhill hurts even more.
No, I love the uphills. I love the climbing grind because I think it works other muscles, like it gives you a break and you can power hike it. Whereas like downhill, you just have to keep going, and your quads take a beating, your knees take a beating. And I saw a lot of people with blown tires at the end of the race, and I was almost one of them. I mean, you really had to like pump your brakes on those downhills.
You had a run recently where your foot was fucked up, right? Was that,
Yeah.
I think I saw on your Instagram a couple weeks ago, wasn't it?
Oh, my foot was fucked up.
Was it your knee or your foot? I remember there was a race that you had on your story where you were kind of limping through the finish line.
Oh, so last week was, last, no, actually, it was a couple, 5, 6 days ago, was the 2-year anniversary of my very first 100-mile race.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I remember
Um,
seeing that. I was like, damn, man.
yeah, and I think we might have talked about it the very first time we chatted, but that was still like top five and like performances I'm most prideful for, not because I made every mistake in the book, as anybody would when they're learning new things, but like because I was basically on one leg for the last like 30 miles of that race, and I just knew I had to finish that thing if it was the last thing I was going to do. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy to reflect that that was 2 years ago, and it's been almost 5 years, half a decade since I started my running journey.
Uh, did you have the kind of like the same inner demons you'd say, or like kind of mental conversations with yourself back then as you do now? Is it kind of developed? Is it different?
It's definitely developed. I think it's developed in the sense that I'm handling it way differently now. Um, when I first started running, like it helped me out a lot mentally on the surface. And I like, that was back when, I'd put on podcasts, music, headphones. Um, 2 years ago, I remember all the talk because when I jumped, when I did my first 100 miler, I was very much like a disciple of like, I think like a lot of people were a disciple of like David Goggins about like doing hard shit, Um, my talk was more of just like, you know, there was some inner coach like you're better than this, like you're stronger than this, but there was also a lot of like inner critic, like, come on, is that all you've got, Um, and I feel like over time, like as we reinvent our why, which I'm sure, the longer you do something, this is something I've gotten from every veteran in ultra running, from veterans and like people who've done any one thing for a long time. the more you're going to have to like reinvent your why. And I think that that might even be the case for you, you know, down the line after doing 5 years, 10 years of jujitsu, like, you know, because we don't just evolve within the sport, right? We evolve, life keeps moving and things keep happening. You know, we get a new job, we find a new partner, we start a new business. And I think things are always just evolving. So I think it's pretty dynamic, man.
Right. And I wanted to ask you as well, because you were talking about kind of like your inner critic versus your inner coach, and you were talking about like kind of the mental conversation you had with yourself this past weekend. Like, how did you kind of switch your brain? Because you said that you did kind of switch your brain from negative self-talk to something more positive. Was there a moment where you were like, I need to change this? Did it happen automatically? Like, how did you? Because I know a lot of people deal with that inner critic, whether it's in regards to, you know, sport like we're talking about, or even just in life. Like when challenges happen in life, maybe you go through a rough breakup, maybe you lose a family member, maybe you know, are struggling financially. There's that inner self-talk of like, fuck, like, can I keep going? Like, is this all worth it? What am I even doing this for? Like, is there a light at the end of this tunnel? Like, how did you kind of switch that conversation, or the momentum of that conversation, from a negative one to a positive one?
It's an ongoing process. Like, you know, going into life, like I left my corporate job just about a year ago. Actually, today is the 16th. My last day at my government job was the 15th of April 2022.
Congrats,
Um,
man. Happy
thank
anniversary.
Thanks, man. Anniversary of freedom, you know, being being my own boss. It's been a roller coaster, and ever since I joined the ownership group of RunTriBike, there have been a lot of moments where, you know, you try new things, and you know, this is, I learned from ultras to fail big and not win small, and that's a mantra that I live by a lot. Um, but there are a lot of moments where I'm like, am I really suited to be a business owner? Like, can I be like, can I run this whole operation by myself? Like, you know, when you're a one-man crew or a two-man crew, like you get it, you know, like you know, you're running a business, you're like the CFO, you're the CEO, you're like, you're HR, you're like, you're wearing every single hat, you know, like, and we haven't reached that inflection point where, you know, we can hire a virtual assistant or bring somebody in and you're just handling all the aspects, and you start to wonder like if you really belong there. um and so what started helping me, and this is why I'm so grateful for my DNF at Moab, which I now, my mindset has shifted to that being like my greatest performance of all time, which would not have been the same answer if you asked me that in our last in our conversation at the time, you know. um I think it's just self-awareness, and it's like a hyper self-awareness. Once I turned off the music, once I had these hours of like self-reflection on the trail by myself, I started to just like tune in to the radio that is my mind and just start to listen to everything that I was saying. And I remember at one point I was listening to all the stuff I was saying to myself. And at first I got a little emotional. I'm like, dude, this is not you. Have you always talked? Like, why are you saying this stuff to yourself? You know, like, this is not you. This is like your childhood, this is your circumstances, this is shit that you've been through, you know. But it's like, if people like, you know, I think at one point I listened to all that stuff and I was like, this is bullshit, man. Like, you can't talk to yourself this way. It was dumb because I was basically, I said it out loud too. Like, I was literally like, man, like, why are you talking to yourself this way, you know? um and that was when I really started. I took the advice of a friend who is an ultra runner and goes through mental health struggles and really speaks out about men's mental health, and started to voice record when I had stuff to say, like actual monologues um, of just me like saying stuff. And I played them back, all the stuff that my mind was saying. And I just remember having this moment where I was like, do you know how you sound right now? Like, do you know the stuff that you're saying to yourself right now? Like, we are really, people, and I'm sure you've been through this too. People have said stuff to us, and people have tried to bring us down, and life has brought the hammer down on us. But really, when it comes down to it, it's crazy how we're literally our own worst enemy, you know? And I think having that self-awareness really got me to a point where I started to practice just being out there in solitude and just taking it all in. And so when the moment came during a race, just like a moment will come like that during life, I'll be able to just firmly say, look, man, like, I don't care about anybody else, but I got your back, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy how we can just beat the hell out of ourselves, man. And I have this, I've got kind of like a sarcastic, self-deprecating humor, and I have uh like a friend of my girlfriend's was here, and we're just like kind of chatting and joking around, and she's like, "Oh, I can knock your ego down like a little bit," and I'm like, "Oh, trust me, I can do it way better than you. I've been doing this for years." Like talking shit to myself is like 90% of my self conversation at this point. I excuse me, sorry. I I get the same that same experience, I feel like sometimes when I'm journaling, because I'll journal. I try and remind myself to journal when I'm feeling like my most emotional, and then I'll read it back the next morning. I do like a lot of reading in the mornings, and I'll read it sometimes and be like, dude, you sound like your 16-year-old self here. Like, I thought you made progress since then. And the other time I get that experience a lot is when I record my podcast, like my solo episodes, because a lot of the time, like there's sometimes where I'll sit down and I'll just turn my camera on, and maybe I'll talk about some current events, or maybe I'll talk about, something I heard at church that really stuck with me, or something I just heard on a podcast. And sometimes like I just do it I call it like a brain dump, like a mental dump. And I'll just talk about something that happened to me recently. And there's been times where I'm sitting there editing and listening to my own thought process, being like, I can't believe I thought like this. Like that was such a weird way to think about that, what I was going through at that time. Like, especially when I listen to sometimes if it's like a week old, it's like, okay, I kind of get where my head's at. I'm barely past that now. But if I listen to something from like a month ago, 2 months ago, a year ago, I'm like, man, why was I thinking like that? Why was I speaking like that? It's so crazy to hear how much we change over a span of time like that. Have you listened to, like, how long have you been recording yourself talk?
Oh, for me, like consistently, probably just a matter of like a few weeks. And it's funny that, it's been like 4 or 5 weeks now. And it's funny that you talk about like going back and listening a month or two back, because I think that's something I need to do. And I probably just need to mixtape it, you know?
Dude, you'd be amazed, man. You'll like, there's been times where it could be like I recorded something one day, and like the next morning I'll wake up and I'll start editing that episode, and I'm like, why did I say it like that? That's such a weird way to like, I don't even think that now. And it's like, that's what I was thinking about my situation at the time. It's so funny to hear. And I think that there's something to be said about how like we're so quick to label, and I think that you kind of touched on this already with your DNF at the Moab. Like we're so quick to label like a period of time in our life as like good or bad or productive or non-productive based on like the emotion we felt in that moment. Like you could have like a rough day and you're like, that was a bad day. And then like a year goes by or 2 years goes by and you look back and you're like, that was one of the best times in my life. Even though the emotion that you felt that day doesn't change, just your perception on it looking back in hindsight does.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's basically the journey with Moab, right? Like the first 6 weeks, I remember like reflecting on it, and I'd say outwardly that I was proud of it, but really, man, I was beating myself up more than anybody. It was like, how can you get so close and not finish, And then now that's sort of changed to like, man, like you did 235 miles without a pacer, without a crew, and you got out there and you gave it your all. And a lot of people are not many people are lucky to be able to see their perceived limit at that time, like physically. And I was able to find like my physical glass ceiling at that moment. I went until I couldn't. And it taught me a lot more than like any of my victories have ever taught me. And that's why looking back at the Moab, I remember chatting with like Merrill, my sponsors, about it. And like we had a little panel and they were like, what is your proudest moment? And, you know, I remember saying the Moab and the DNF at Moab instead of like going back to like my successful finishes, because I grew the most from that experience because I failed big. I didn't choose comfort. I didn't choose to win small. I chose something where the possibility of failure was high, and I went after it. And at the end of the day, like the results will be what they are. We're not our results. We are the way we react and we perceive. And, we are who we are based on the process. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because I do think that what you feel in the moment does not define what that what that journey or what that moment means in like the overall structure or the overall like story of your life. um what we perceive as a failure at the time might actually be like a stepping stone to something greater. It just all depends on your perspective.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so easy to kind of look at your past, or I mean, like in my own perspective, it's easy to look at my past and stack up all the losses I've had, all the times I'm embarrassed of or feel guilt about or shameful of, and be like, man, I am a bad person. Like I really don't deserve anything that I have. And it's kind of like guilt trip, like a self guilt trip. And it's kind of like a martyr mindset of like, yeah, I deserve all this bad stuff that's happening to me. Like I should just take it all now, take it on the chin. And it's just so easy to fall into that trap, man.
Yeah, and how do you like, I mean, when you've had that like thought process for a while and you've been through some stuff, and like you've done things you're not proud of, which I'm sure everybody's done things they're not proud of. And we all have those moments where it comes back to like something you said or did when you're like 14 years old, and then like comes back to you. Or you know a friendship ended or like a relationship ended, and no matter how toxic it was or how bad things were, like you're always thinking about, man, could I have done this better? um like could I have done anything better? And so like I like the words that you used to describe it. It's almost like you're just martyring yourself, like I deserve all this bad shit that's happening to me, instead of like having the mindset of like I deserve I deserve better. I deserve good things because everybody deserves good things. Um, but it's hard. I mean, like, for you personally, how do you compartmentalize like dealing with that martyr mindset? Because I'm sure like even after what happened to you a couple of days ago, there might have been a moment that passed through your mind, even during the laughing, where you were like, well, shit, could I have done anything better at that moment?
Oh, dude, I'm still thinking that now. I still think that, but dude, I there's a couple of different things that I kind of use as like tools in my toolbox, as you were saying earlier. I when I first started getting help with my mental health, I remember I was in that martyr mindset. I remember um there was thoughts of suicide, thoughts of giving up, and I quickly kind of banished those thoughts from my head because I never wanted to. One of my biggest fears was having to like put my parents through that pain and misery of losing one of their children and having them feel guilt and shame and feeling like, well, couldn't I have done better? Like I was so scared of them feeling that hurt. And so I decided like I'm never doing that. I can't ever give up. I have to keep going. And I remember saying to myself, it was like kind of a conversation with God, or some people could say the universe, or some people could say my inner self, or whatever you want to say. But I remember saying, if I have to go through this, I'm going to try and make sure I alleviate this feeling for somebody else. Like if I can't feel good, it's clear. Like I was really dark in a dark place, and I was surely convinced like it's not possible for me to feel happiness. That's what I thought. And I was like, if I can't feel good, if I can't feel happiness, um, I'm going to try my best to try and alleviate this feeling for somebody else. And maybe that's what my purpose is on this earth. And I kept that thought like I was kind of in that like fake martyr mindset for years. And so that's a familiar feeling for me. And I revisit that feeling all the time of just like someone else is going to go through something like this and I'm going to try and lead by example. And so that was like kind of one of the first tools that I adapted for that feeling of like when I felt like garbage, I was going to keep powering through it. But I had this experience one time, and this is the thing that I've been turning back to a lot of the time recently. I had this experience one time where I was sitting in the sauna in a gym when I was back in my bodybuilding days. I just hit weights for like a couple hours, and this is like again in a dark time of my life. And I was sitting in the sauna, just kind of in a dark place mentally, and I was in tears. And this woman comes into the sauna, and she's like, what's going on in your life? Like I can just feel like a dark energy coming from you. Like I feel like I felt compelled to ask you what's going on. And I was like, man, fuck it, I'm just going to open up and talk to this lady. So I start just telling her about what I'm going through, and she starts telling me about what she's going through, and she basically looks at me and says like something along the lines of like, uh sorry for people that have heard this story on the podcast before, but I just think it's a useful story. And she says to me like, when like a teacher in elementary school or high school like sees a kid like fucking up and not doing the work, and there's like kind of two reactions. Like one of the reactions is like, fuck it, like best of luck during exam time, like I'm never going to see this kid again, I'll just let him do his thing. And then there's the other reaction, which is like, hey, like smack the book on the desk. Like, what's going on, man? Like, I know you can do this work. I know you're capable. I know you have it in you. You're just not applying yourself. You're not focused. You're not doing the work. And the reason that teacher does that to that student, and sometimes even gives them more work than they're currently doing, or what's required of everybody else, is because the teacher sees that potential in that person, right? And God does the same thing, and the universe does the same thing. It's kind of like when it you could say like it only gives the hardest test to people that are capable of going through them, or it'll only serve you challenges when it knows that you're actually capable of overcoming them. And so now when I view things like this, that's why I said in the very beginning, it was like a test. It was a test for me. And there's tons of different tests, and you're only going to receive the test that you're needing to receive. Like for you, for
Yeah.
example, like, running a marathon, running an ultra marathon, like that would be a massive test for somebody, but you can do it. You've done it before. You've done it multiple times before in the past. And so that feat of running for that long, running that distance isn't the test that you need to overcome. Like what you need to overcome is going to be the side thing of like, oh, if this didn't happen, I'd be good. Like whether it's an injury or something that's happening in your personal life or something that's happening with your work, with your job, with your business, with a relative, with anything else, like that's your test at that time. And that's what you need to overcome to get to the next thing. And so now when I face these challenges and I feel like I can feel my blood boiling, where I'm like, oh, really, this right now? Like that was the first thing I thought when that happened to me the other day, is like, man, it's Friday at 4 o'clock. I was just about off work, and now I have to call my insurance and deal with all this bullshit right now. And I was driving home, literally had to strap my door back onto my truck because it wasn't even on properly. And I'm like, of course, this is what I have to overcome right now. Like I was like, of course, this is what I have to overcome right now, because it was like that aspect was it would, if it can trigger you, then you have to overcome it.
Yeah, agreed. And just like overcoming, like what you said about just like overcoming things in life, like, it's easy for somebody, and myself included, after failure or something, to say, well, if this had happened, if this had gone right, then things would have been okay. If my foot hadn't gotten messed up at so and so, like mile 30 or something, I would have finished. And in reasonable cases, it makes sense, like when you're looking at the bigger picture, to like drop out of a race. Um, but when you're looking at the big picture of like life's challenges, it's really sometimes good to like shift your mindset from like, you know, like this happened to me the other day, like with the accident, right? Like on Friday, like you got into the accident, like shifting your mindset from like, oh, like, man, like this, to like, good, I've got this, um, or like, like going back to like my first finish at my 100-mile race. Why am I proud of that as one of my top 3 finishes? Because I went through the most shit in that race, not because it was a perfect race. I weathered a million storms. Like my feet were shredded, like my foot was my literally like one of my entire foot like wasn't working. um and I was just out there for like the maximum amount of time you could be out there. I couldn't eat anything, and I'm proud of it, whether I would have finished or not, because I weathered the most storms, and I grew from it. Um, and like, thanks for sharing that story about like, being in the sauna, because I know you might have mentioned it in your podcast before, but I personally never heard the story from you. So um, I think my purpose, like, it's really heartfelt to me that like your family was a big reason why you didn't commit suicide. because that is true for me as well. Because I have a little sister who looks up to me, because I have a mom whose heart would break if she saw me like that. And, I, at the time, it was like for me, like when I was 16 and I thought I attempted suicide the first time, like it was also like a martyr mindset. It was like, there was one, nobody's gonna help you. Like you're just destined to be in this shit, Um, but as things came together with running and ultras, I realized that like these experiences, like you said, they can be tests, for like, or maybe we perceive them as tests and not as shit because we've been through hell in life. And so what that's done for us is we perceive them as test perception, versus like somebody who might have a downward spiral when they see the same thing that we're seeing, what we see as a test. um, for me, I think that's helped me realize that I need to keep pushing my personal limits, because I have a story of like being a nobody and turning into basically rewiring my DNA through hard work, and I can use that story to inspire people to lift themselves from rock bottom and be a spark plug and be a better leader. And so I think we have very similar purposes in that regard. And I think because we view what life has put us through as tests, it helps us chase that purpose.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think as well, when you put yourself out in a position where you are able to fail, it really does expose the truth. And what I mean by that is like we all have that negative self-talk of like, oh, I'm a bitch, I'm doing this wrong in my life, I'm fucking up in this area, like I suck at this. Like how many times like how have you had that self-talk where you're like, I suck at this, I'm garbage at that, I'll never be good at this, I'll never be good at that. And there's always the other side of that where your ego kicks in the other way and you're like, oh, I'm so good at this, I'm so good at that, like. And a lot of that at the end of the day is just talk. And when you put yourself out in the and have the opportunity to, either become a victor or become a failure, it exposes the truth. And so you can kind of look back on those experiences of like, hey, I don't need to point out my weaknesses. I exposed them myself. I know where I need to improve, but I also know where I overcame something. And like you can draw back on times where you did kind of push yourself and overcome certain obstacles of your life and be like, oh, I'm going through, this might not be the exact same challenge, but I've overcome this feeling before, I've overcome this experience before, or this injury, whether it's physical, emotional, or anything like that. It's like, wait, we've overcome this before. I don't need the negative self like talk. I don't need talk. I have
Mm-hmm.
actual evidence that I can do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or I have actual evidence that I can even get closer to doing it. I have evidence that I can improve. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
the times we feel the worst when we feel like there's no way to improve this situation. And I think that
Yeah.
it's like one of those things where you can look back after you've exposed yourself to the opportunity of failure or anything like that and be like, I don't need to listen to the talk. I have evidence that it's possible to improve. So I just have to crack the code and figure out, where I have to improve. If I've exposed that already, it's like, okay, what's the first step to improvement?
Yeah, absolutely agree. It's just totally agree with that. I mean, it's just like, the more you do things like you with jujitsu, with, how you not just that, but like how you handle situations like, your accident, how you handle, you know, how you deal with your relationships in life, like friends, family, significant other. Um, that's all like evidence in the bank, like that you can overcome things, and not just like overcome like physical obstacles, but like overcome like your own mental trials and tribulations, the things going on in your head. Um, and I think that's where I ultra running helps me out a lot, is it gives me more evidence in the bank. The more I put myself out there, I keep putting myself in the pain cave, the hurt locker, whatever you want to call it, right? Um, I keep putting myself out there knowing that this is going to suck and it's going to hurt and you're going to go through lows. And I almost, like you said, it gets your blood boiling. I almost perceive it as like a challenge, like how can I react to this um in a way that's going to help me develop my character. I see it as opportunities to chip away at like growing myself and evolving myself. And I look forward to, and I'm excited and look forward to those moments. And one of the things I said to myself out loud in those last few miles where things are really starting to hurt was, this is what you signed up for. It wasn't for the first 50K, it was for the last 8K, this is the moment you came from. Just like with weightlifting, it's like you're not getting your money's worth on the first 6 out of the 8 reps. It's those last 2 reps where you're sore and you're pushing yourself, and how you react to that mentally, physically, is where the growth is. And when you overcome those things, you add things to, as Goggins would call it, the cookie jar. For me, I call it like um, putting like cash in my mental bank, like things that I can like withdraw when I'm like in a tougher moment. I can go to that, and I can go. One of the things I said audibly out loud in the last couple races I've been in is, come on, you've been through worse shit than this in life and in ultras. Like, surely you've got more left in your tank. Like, you're not done yet. And that instantly gave me juice in my legs and like fueled my mind. And I started, a couple people had passed me earlier in the race. Like, it sounds childish, but I took it as a challenge and I started picking people off at the end of the race, because I just knew I had more left in my tank.
Yeah, I don't think that sounds childish at all, man. I think inherently a lot of people are just competitive that way, and we're driven by competitiveness. And I think that people a lot of the time they'll say it's negative, and it can be in some ways to have that mentality of like keeping up with the Joneses. And again, it can be certain times like negative in some aspects of life, but I think that in other aspects of life, it's like that's also the thing that keeps you in the loop. It keeps you in the game of like, hey, that person's still going. I think I'm better than them. I think I got this. And not from like an ego perspective of like, oh, I'm better than everybody else, but it's like looking at someone and saying, I guess a better way to say it would be like, if they can do it, I can do it.
No, and the best part about it is that I had a friend. I don't know if you're familiar with ankylosing spondylitis, AS.
You're
It's
speaking Latin
a,
to me now. I don't know what that means.
so AS is a condition that like basically fuses your spine to like your other bones and stuff. And so I know ultra runners who have AS, and when they get out there, they feel several times more excruciating pain than the average person. And I remember being out there doing a 58K, and I had a friend who was out there in her 40s with AS, going for her first 100-mile buckle, which, spoiler, she got in 40 hours on a flat course with AS. And I remember thinking, like, surely if, she can go out there and put herself through this several times more pain. It was like, fueling off each other. Like, she said that I've done things that have inspired her. And at that moment, as I told her later, I was like, I was going through a tough moment, Lori. Like, you inspired me because I was looking at your example and going like, man, if you can keep moving forward, like surely I can keep moving forward. I'm blessed to like be in the physical condition that I am. And going back to that person in the race who had just come off of surgery 6 months ago, who was smiling and having a good time. And I thought, man, if this person can smile and be in tears and happy and enjoying that they're out there, and I'm in this great physical position, like, surely I can like put on a smile, And I think just the example of like, yeah, it might be like keeping up with the Joneses, but I think if you have like the right circle around you or the right people around you, you can draw off each other and fuel each other and, support each other to just grow and evolve.
Yeah, man. It's crazy what happens when you surround yourself with the right people, man. I've been meaning to ask you as well. I don't know how much you're able to talk about it. But like what is how's it going with RunTriBike? I was wondering like what your process is, what your roles are like, and like kind of what's going on with all that so that people can kind of understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, I think with RunTriBike, I'm very happy to say that we're out of our we're kind of out of our growth, like our introduction phase. And I think people really know who we are now. And, me and Jason Bahamundi is the other he's the founder and the other co-owner of RunTriBike. He's also an ultra runner and Ironman. He's done the Cocodona 250. So both of us like we knew we wanted to have a business in endurance sports because we live and breathe endurance sports, and neither of us are like podium athletes. We're just average Joes. Like Jason comes from the heart of Queens, New York, and he's the last person people expected to become an ultra runner. And it was kind of the same with me coming from like, living in the concrete jungle in LA and not growing up surrounded by the trails, like not coming from a great like financial situation to be able to do this. And our whole goal with RunTriBike is just sharing all those stories of like the everyday athlete, the people like you and me who are just, just living our lives, running a business, doing our jobs, but also getting out there and doing endurance sports. And Jason knew for a while when he started the business 3 years ago that there was a niche for that other magazines like Trail Runner Magazine, Triathlete, and Runner's World, they were not targeting. And we had an audience in that. And we've sort of evolved into like media and marketing. And, we're in the growth phase now. And it's tough when I will say, like, from a mental side, it's tough. And Jason and I meet every week and we talk about it. We talk about the numbers and the direction we communicate. And it can be really tough when you're in this in between phase where you're growing, but you're also a two-man show. So you're kind of handling everything, like we're putting together the performance reports, we turn our fireside chats, which is our Instagram live show. Like I edit those into podcasts. And as you know, editing a podcast is no joke. We contribute articles to our website, runtrimag.com, and we're pitching to at least 5 or 6 people every single day. And so we're handling everything. And sometimes we have to try to avoid getting overwhelmed. But it's a very exciting time for the business. And, one of the things we do in that process to ourselves and to each other is reiterate how much we appreciate each other's strengths. Jason's been doing marketing for 25 years, and I jumped off the deep end and learned social media and marketing complete 180 from my engineering career a year ago, and um, it's freed up Jason to do more of what he's good at. And the two of us are just growing the business. And yeah, I mean, it's been a wild ride, man.
Yeah, and having you guys both be kind of endurance athletes as well, like I'm sure that that kind of like, is he still competing? He's still training a ton?
Totally. And actually, he's doing his first 100-mile race in 4 years, in a couple weeks, because he's trying to qualify for a race in France, which is called UTMB. It's in Chamois, France. Um, and that 100-mile race in France, the 161-kilometer race, I think it has just about 10,000 meters of vert in that race, and you have 48 hours to finish it.
Oh,
That race is like the mecca of like, it's like the international like world, it's like the World Cup of like ultra running. Like people dream to go to that race in France and race among it, and you go through like cities, and people populate the cities almost like Tour de France, but like with running, you know? Um, and so he's still competing, and he's doing his first 100 miler, and I'm going to be doing the last 34 miles with him. So that's going to be fun trying to bring him home to the finish line. But yeah, man, like I said, both of us, like, we try to make a point of like letting people know that we're not just like people sitting behind the desks, like we live and breathe the sport. Like I'm going and doing these extreme ultra races, and Jason's still out here competing. And um yeah, just really fortunate to be able to be in a position to have started a business in endurance sports.
when you guys are training for these different events, like does the business just kind of take like a pause? Like do you guys keep working day in and day out? Like how does that kind of how does the business compete with competing? That's a better way to ask it.
Oh no, man. Like I think it's I'll say it like this, and I think you'll understand this. Like when people ask you the question, like, how do you balance all these things in your life? My answer always used to be either I'm not sure, or, I do this, this, and that. But I think what I realized is that there's really no such thing as balance. There's a such thing as like flow. Like you might have this might be the same for you, but you might have some days that are like Sunday might be like your podcast editing day or something. And you just sit down and you're like, I'm just going to take this 3 hour block and just focus on editing without any distractions. And some days might be like, um, now going back to my case, like there might be some days like for example, a rest day from my training. A rest day from my training, like I kind of, in some funny ways, I kind of dreaded it recently. Um, like not in a bad way, but I know that my rest day is when I'm going to have the most time free to work on my business. So my rest day might be a physical rest day, but it's a very business intensive day where I'm taking like client meetings and trying to fill in as much as possible. So I don't think any one thing takes a backseat to the other. I think that they're both equally important. Um, I just think that there are some days that are business intensive and some days that are sports intensive. And I think it's all about just finding the flow and just knocking out one thing at a time.
Yeah, man, I 100% agree. I I'm pretty much always doing something around the clock, and I feel like that's yeah, that's just kind of how I've operated a lot in the last little bit. And I know for myself, like people kind of ask sometimes like, hey, like what's like when do you take a rest day? When do you take a break? And I'm like, rest day? I'm like, no, no, no. There's like if I can get 2 hours of chilling out on a Sunday, I'm good. Like like there's no like full day. It's like there's small little time periods where I get like a little bit of a rest. But it makes you appreciate those little moments a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Like, like you said, like if you can even get like a couple hours off during the week when you're like on the clock, like it's great. And you start to like be more efficient and enjoy and be more present in those moments, whether it's spending time with your family or spending time with yourself. And you start to look for ways to be present in even moments that other people would consider busy. Like, I don't think people quite understand it when I say, like, I'm going out on a trail run and it's an easier one and I'm just spending hours out there and it's like and I see it as time to myself. They're like, how do you get into a meditative reflective state when you're running? It's like, I don't know, you just do, like, um you just become more efficient with those things. And um you know when you do things that I think also when you do things that you really enjoy, like with Run Try Bike, like it's a pleasure to be telling people stories. There are aspects of it where those extra hours that you put in don't feel like work. They feel like your passion, and there are parts of the job, like, don't get me wrong, that I don't like, like putting together performance reports and crunching out numbers and doing business taxes, because all of my small business owners, we know how that is here in the States. But like the other stuff, like writing for the business, like editing parts of the podcast and making reels, and um getting on the fireside chat and like talking to other small business owners and seeing how we can support each other. That stuff brings me a lot of joy, and it oftentimes it doesn't feel like work to me.
Yeah, man. I 100% agree. I got to run to the washroom, so we're going to take a little pause right here, and then we'll pick up right where I want to hold on to that thought because there's something I was about to say, but I just got to pee after drinking that coffee and water.
Totally.
Hold on one sec. Sorry, now I can focus better. You're still there, right?
Yep. Still
Okay,
here.
beautiful. Are you on a time crunch at all? Do you have any time constraints?
I think I'm good to at least go for another 20 more minutes or something.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, I was gonna say, dude, I can talk to you for hours, but
Yeah, we have good conversations, man.
yeah. What I was gonna say is there's always you touched on this and I like that you brought it up, is there's always aspects of doing what we love that we don't love. And I always compare that to like my podcast as well, because I love having conversations like this. Like I've always been an extrovert, and I love being able to talk to somebody that I find interesting and that has cool things to say and that teaches me and that I can bounce ideas off of. I can talk to people for hours. And I also love getting the feedback of like, hey, I like the way you said this. That really helps me out with this kind of challenge that I'm facing in life. Or I never really heard somebody say it that way and I relate to it more. Or I never thought that somebody thought that way and I can relate to that and I feel a lot less alone. Like there's all these great aspects of podcasting that I love so much. But for me, like I honestly hate doing all like the back end stuff of like uh paperwork with taxes, because I do obviously like sell merch and there's a lot of stuff on the back end, like keeping inventory and spending money that I don't want to spend and advertising on. So like I hate social media. I hate doing all that stuff. I hate, editing, but there's always the aspects of like, okay, if I just get this done, I can do the stuff that I love. And just having a balance of, I like how you said that as well, as like I do compartmentalize, like, okay, on this day I'm going to spend like hours editing so that the rest of the week I can just do the stuff that I like to do. And like I fill my morning times with editing because it's like, well, not many people are down to talk at 4 a.m., but I'm going to be up anyways, so I'll edit at that time. Like there's always ways of like, all right, if I could muscle through this stuff that I don't like, then I'll get to enjoy the parts of it that I really love, and I'll be able to share that with someone else.
Yeah, agreed. And there's this rule that, I don't know exactly where it comes from. I'll have to find out exactly where it came from. I saw it on a tweet, but it was called the 333 rule. Um, and it's a rule that I've kind of just been like compartmentalizing my tasks on. It's 3 hours on a task or project that is more intuitive, like maybe like podcast editing or like, writing an article or something that requires you to be in a deep dive focus, like a 3 hour block. And then it's the second three is three smaller tasks that you can do for your business or like something that you're focused on, whatever it is in life. And then the last three is three maintenance activities, whether it be mental, physical, or spiritual, that you can do for yourself. For me, like non-negotiables or like, 5 hours, sorry, not 5 hours, at least 5 minutes of stillness every single day, 5 minutes of stretching every single day. And, um, the other maintenance activity is like 5 hours of some kind of active movement every day.
5 hours
Uh,
of movement.
five. I keep saying hours. It's ultra running talk, man. Everything is hours. Five minutes. I think we even talked about that a while back, but people always think about like, what's the most I can do? Um, and what's the most I can do to become better at something instead of thinking about what's the bare minimum I'd be willing to do even if I had a shitty day, whether that's like 5 minutes of like stretching or 5 minutes of like practicing like a maneuver in jujitsu or something.
Yeah. I have that like on my days that I feel completely beat up and like my joints are all jacked up from sparring session from the day before or something like that, when I'm like, oh man, I cannot work out today. I have a rule where like I have to spend 45 minutes moving every single day no matter what. And there's a loop around my neighborhood that I can usually get done in just under half hour. Like it takes me probably 27 minutes. And I know like if I can get that loop done and then walk a couple blocks and then do like half an hour of stretching, that's still an extremely productive day. Like that's
Yeah.
still, it's not like the maximum, but it's like it gets the bare minimum done. It's a little bit of cardio and then a little walk to clear some lactic acid and then stretching so that tomorrow I feel better and I can hit it hard again.
Yeah, and often like I remember even for myself, like I used to be a habitual quitter, and I think that societally, like we have this mindset of like, you see somebody or you see this recommendation and it's like you should exercise like half an hour a day or an hour a day or um it's like some six pack abs program or some program that influencers putting out on social media, and they're like, you got to do an hour 3 days a week. And oftentimes, like, this is just an example, like people will build up to that. Um, and then at some point, like they'll burn themselves out because they came out hot, and then they just stop entirely. What if we shifted that mindset of all or nothing, which we see a lot in like life and hustle culture and like social media, to all or something? Maybe you get back later than you want to from your job and you can't do 45 minutes of running, or you can't do that half an hour loop, but maybe you have 15 minutes to spare. Could you still get out there and do 15 minutes? Isn't that better than doing zero?
Yeah, 100%. Like there's always something that you can do that way. And for me, like, I'm sure that you feel the same way. It's like I can at least run for like 20 minutes. I can get that done. And like that's like where it starts. And then like that's how it was this morning. Like I had a busy morning. I did my reading, I did a bit of journaling, I did my meal prep, and I was like, all right, I got 40 minutes before I have to leave for church because we're meeting a couple people and I got to pick up this person. I was like, I can crush a 25-minute run really quick, shower up, and I'll be ready to go out the door. Like, and then when I get home, it's like, oh, now I can take the dogs for a walk. It's raining, but I got a jacket. Like, I'm good. Like, there's always like you'll find little moments to squeak in a little bit more movement.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, I had like, one of the things that, like I said, that this, I had said earlier, this is the most well-rounded training cycle I've had. And one of the reasons that is not because of how many miles I put down, but because of how intuitive I was with listening to my body. I got sick earlier in the training cycle when I went to India and I was putting down miles. I think you remember seeing it on my stories.
Oh yeah.
I did like I think 10 miles in that I think I did like 10 total miles during that week because I got like a throat infection and listened to my body and stopped, but switched that up with like some yoga and some like active movement and just walking and climbing stairs. And um even just this last week, I wasn't properly recovered from a long run I did on Sunday. I came in on Monday and my heart rate was like through the roof and I wasn't feeling right. I went out for like 10 minutes, I think, and decided like halfway through those 10 minutes that, today doesn't feel like a running day, but I can still get out here and I can do a walk. I can still put time on my feet and then I can get inside and do a little bit extra stretching. I mean, we don't need this all or nothing mindset. There's always something you can do. And even if like you can't get out there and be physically active because you have an injury or something, like you can sharpen your mental toolkit. Maybe it's not 5 minutes of running, but maybe it's 5 minutes of like practicing breath work or, you know, journaling or something. But there's always something you can do mentally, physically, spiritually to better yourself, even if it's 5 minutes is not a hard and fast rule, even if it's just 1 minute, like if you're doing 1 minute of something every single day for 365 days, next thing you know, you've put in 365 minutes of work versus putting in nothing at all.
Yeah, 100%. And how much that translates into things like business or relationships or anything else, because it's like, okay, maybe I can't, move forward with this customer or this client or this partner or whatever it is, but maybe I can spend some time writing some strategy. Maybe I can rethink this other issue that I was going through before. Maybe I can jump on the computer and do some back end stuff of just like, how about prep for tax season? Because I know that's coming up or whatever it could be. Like, there's always like, it's like just thinking about like, what is the best use of my time? If I can't move forward with this aspect, then how can I use this time the best so that I'm not choked in the future? Like thinking like, wow, I wasted that time. I wasted that precious time that I had and I could have done something else. I could have done something different. And,
Yeah.
so moving forward before you go to Everest, like what's kind of like your mindset or your training going into this season of your life?
Just be well rounded in every aspect. One of the tones I set for myself was that I really want to be great at the sport. Like I really want to go out there and put in the work, but I also want to do this for a long time. And that means listening to your body. That means if, for example, if I didn't sleep well the night before, that means cutting my run a little bit short. And the opposite, like if I had a good sleep or if I'm feeling really good, pump down a few extra miles. But just being dynamic and understanding that I am more than just, these are all just aspects of my life. We are more than that, like, and realizing that while run while running is an aspect of my life, it is not who I am. It's just something that I do. And it's something that gives me purpose, but I'm also a business owner. I'm also a son. I'm also an older brother. I'm also a leader to people in my community. Um, I'm also an example, as I found out, very much an example for people in the South Asian community who look at this thing that I'm doing and see that it's totally unconventional for South Asians to do. And um, we're just so much more than these one things. So my mantra is just like trying to find the flow with everything. And if I have to cut mileage short in a week or something, like stop looking at that, just that one week, zoom out to the big picture and think like, are these 5 or 6 miles that you would have pushed yourself through going to matter 10 years from now? Are they going to matter 15 years from now when you're still doing this sport and you've been consistent regardless? No, but if you do end up forcing yourself to do those miles, you might burn yourself out. You might injure yourself. Next thing you know, you're out for a year. Next thing you know, like you never want to do this sport again. So I think just like trying to find the balance of like being dynamic and doing those things and being present and intentional, but also like playing the long game and realizing that this is an ongoing process. I love this process and this is something I want to do for a long time.
And just so that you have something to reflect upon when you listen back to this later, what's one thing you're excited for and one thing that you're anxious about going into this tribulation or this trial that you're going to have in near Everest?
Oh man. I would say in terms of like what I'm excited about, I mean, I'm excited that I have these feelings again that I haven't had in a long time. And I'm talking about, feelings that you might have had like before your first marathon, like the nerves, the excitement, before you do a hard thing that, the possibility of success isn't totally guaranteed. And like you're doing something that is going to test your physical and mental limits farther than you've ever like tested them before. Like, I mean, I've done 100 miles and I've done 200 miles, and people have told me nonstop, like, it's 70K. You've done way more than that. And I'm like, not in the cold, not at altitude, not what is the highest race in the world, So I'm excited to have those feelings again. The thing that I'm most nervous about is probably the altitude and just going out there. And one of the things that people have to realize and that I'm trying to temper my expectation to is that I'm not just going to waltz into the start line, right? Like I have to fly, I have to like drive to Lukla, I have to get on a plane in the world's most dangerous airport. I have to trek 12 days up altitude to the start lines, camp out there 2 nights, be cold, tired, sleep deprived. And then I get to have the honor of towing the line at that race. So I'm not going to start fresh in a hotel room, happy as a daisy, like with a hot shower. Like I'm going to already be like, excuse my language, I'm already going to be pretty fucked when I start the race. So, um, I would say I'm nervous about that, but I think that goes into my excitement as well, because I feel like just getting to the start line is going to test my physical limits, and then being able to race when I'm already tired and sleep deprived, um, and be out there for 15, 16 hours at a time, because who knows how long that's going to take when you're at 50% of the oxygen at sea level. Like imagine breathing half of what you're breathing right now, and trying to run in that's what I'm going to do.
Man, that's crazy, and it puts a lot of my nerves um, into perspective because I get that feeling. I can literally feel it right now. The feeling that I get like before a competition, and I used to get this feeling a lot when I used to play rugby growing up in high school. Like the day of a game, or something that means a lot to me. Like my last competition, it hit me like the second I sat in my truck and turned my truck on to drive to the venue, my stomach just dropped. And I was like, fuck, today's the day. This is what I've been preparing for the last couple months. This is what the training's come to. And then I started getting that, like, what if I lose my first fight and I'm eliminated? What if I do something that embarrasses me? What if I like completely mess up? What if I get injured? What if I can't train? Like what if I like there's all these thoughts and I remember when I was driving to my last competition, I thought to myself, like, man, it's been a while since I felt this nervous. It's been a while since I felt like this. Like I kind of like this feeling. And yeah, dude, I know for myself, like that's where the inner talk starts to come out, where I was like, look, man, like you spar every single day. Like this is kind of just like a sparring session with a little bit more the losing's gonna hurt more, but the winning's gonna feel better. That's kind of the way I thought it is. Like, you spar every single day. So all you have to do is do what you do every single day, but with a little bit more intention behind it. And that's kind of the way I just kind of convinced myself to follow through with it. Like, cause yeah, dude, when those nerves hit, whether it is in regards to competing in something or having to show up for work, or, when those nerves do hit you, where like not you personally, but you listening, whoever's listening to this, like those nerves hit for everybody at different times. And it's like you really have to just kind of analyze your inner dialogue when that happens of like, what is this feeling actually? And when was the last time I felt like this? Like, did I come out on top? Did I overcome it? Why or why not? And I don't know, man. I think that feeling is truly what being alive feels like. It's like, oh, I care. I'm actually passionate about this. Like, this means something to
Mhm.
me. Maybe I need to do this more often.
Exactly, exactly. You hit the nail on the head with that. Like it means we care about this, and it's like something that makes us feel alive. And one of the things that happened to me during the last couple ultra races that I did, the 55K that I did in March and the 58K that I did yesterday, was like I've welled up with, like, people will say like, man, you've done 100-mile races before, right? But it's like I can't tell you how many times, like, even in a 50K or something, I've welled up with like emotion, almost been in the brink of tears. And it's not because I was in pain, but because I was just so grateful. I thought after Moab was done, there was a moment where I thought my running career was over, not because physically I was not going to be able to run again, but mentally I just thought, like, do I have it anymore? Is this something that I can do anymore? Like, have I finally reached the end of my fuse and am I burned out? Um, and so I fixated on that and the fact that I feel stronger than ever, mentally, physically, as a runner, healthier than ever. And one of the things that I fixated on was just gratitude. Every single time I toe the line, whether it's a 50K, whether it's a 5K, whether it's a 100-mile race or 200-mile race or a race on like the highest mountain in the world or like at base camp or whatever, like I just fixate on gratitude, just having the privilege to be able to test my limits over and over again, and mind willing, like body willing, like God willing, able to like keep doing this thing. And that gets me through so much. So I think one thing to add to your point is just like, and it's just having gratitude for those nerves and that excitement. Because like, man, that is truly, I agree with you, nail on the head. That is truly the feeling of like being alive.
Yeah, it's a magnificent feeling, man. It really is beautiful. We're coming up on 2 hours here, so out of respect for your time, man, I'll let you get motoring off, because I know, actually, no, we're in the same time zone, so it's not too late for you either right now. But
No.
I'll let you get on with your evening, and I'll let you get on with your day. But you know how I roll. I'll do my own intro, but the onus is on you for the outro. Tell people where they can find you, and give a little message of maybe spread something positive, maybe something motivational, maybe something that just closing thought that you want to leave people with. I'll let you take the floor for the last little bit, and then I'll let you get on your way, man.
Yeah, a couple things, man. You can find me on Instagram at the Aum Gandhi. Um, you know, not too hard of a handle to find, although people butcher my last name all the time.
It'll be in the description, so don't worry. I'll put that in there so people can find it.
And then, if you want to find more amazing stories of like the everyday mid to back of the pack runner or the endurance athlete, and just stories of life using endurance sports as a conduit, then you can go to runtrimag.com. You can find us on Instagram at runtrimag as well. And last thing is, I always do my runs for charity, and this time my chosen charity is a local charity for marginalized kids, and providing them 21st century like education. Um, in Nepal, it's an organization called Kids of Kathmandu. I made a post about it, and fundraiser link is in my Instagram, and our goal is to raise $10,000, and they're putting that towards education, bringing classes, and they just broke ground on their 10th school actually, and they're building sustainable 21st century schools, just for kids in marginalized communities. As you guys know, Nepal was hit by an earthquake in 2015, and there's still a lot of recovery to be doing from that. And just like I believed with Richstone Family, who I raised money for, you know one of my mantras is for the kids. I believe that every kid, no matter where they are, deserves a fair shot. And I just want to give these kids a fair shot because I'm racing in Nepal. And I think that it's my purpose to go out there and be a conduit and help bring support and awareness to what this organization's doing. So, yeah, you can find that fundraiser in my Instagram. And other than that, man, I'm just going to say, it's not about, one message I can put out to everybody is it's not about being perfect. It's about perfect attendance. Just show up every day. Some days are going to be bad, some days are going to be good, but as long as you show up, you just, and keep moving forward, like things will happen and you're going to be okay. And it's going to be less than perfect a lot, but just show up every day. Perfect attendance is what matters.
I love that, man. I absolutely love that. Written up there on my wall. I don't know if you can see it, that little white thing up there. It just says keep fucking pushing. And that's what I have on
Love
my
it.
wall. So when I walk in my office every day, I see that. I'm like, keep fucking pushing, man. Keep fucking pushing. But good luck, man. I'm excited to hear about the results. I'm excited for the future episode that we're going to have to be able to talk about how everything goes, man. I love you, brother. I appreciate you, man. And God bless you. And I'm stoked to hear about this, man. Good luck. And I hope your training goes well, man.
Yeah, love you too, man. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate all the conversations we can have because, like you said, we can do this thing for hours.
Oh, dude,
You know?
trust me. This is what I love to do the most, man. All right, brother. Much love and peace out.
All right. Peace out, man.